$50.
Yeah.
Get online.
That would be the first one in your lunch.
Would be a sweet one. Never gets into how you fit it in there, you know? 31 feet of road.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
But with the volume and the speed.
separated. Yeah. Yeah, because protected really doesn't mean just putting in, bollards or whatever. It's more like a buffer or whatever. But.
Bells. Like everything.
Good speed
They had
Mary
the
design is a set.
whole patch put on a couple of
Mine,
years ago.
yeah.
It's on that.
Yeah, and I did.
I just got it through.
Yeah, I got Maureen.
Right as I come in.
With the map of the world on it.
Yeah.
That's,
Everybody look at me.
You wait a couple minutes. It's 12:01. We are ready.
Did you say they were?
So
Chris.
4, 5, 6.
We should have 9 for.
Nick hasn't signed it.
Who responded? I
Right,
know
well,
John's
let's
not coming to the shelter.
go ahead and start the, we calling ours a work session or study session? Study session? The December 14th, 2017 study session of the Transportation Commission. We're here going to talk about 2 topics today, the sidewalk maintenance enforcement procedures and the 2018 street maintenance plan.
I wanted Steve here first.
All right, street maintenance plan it is.
Hello.
Hello.
Hold on to bring that map up here so I don't.
Since he was deferred from the last.
Yes.
All right.
It's good.
I know it's kind of difficult to see here, but if we need to, we can, zoom in and take a look at different areas and what have you. Just to start, again, my name's Steve Lashley. I'm a project engineer in Public Works. I administrate the pavement management program, contracted maintenance projects. At the end of this year, we completed the end of cycle 4 of our street ratings. I have a report that's going to City Commission on a city manager's report on December 19th that basically give a program update on how we're seeing where the program's at. Talking about some of those indicators like the PCI level, deterioration rates, percent of the streets that are in good, fair, poor condition. Some of those prime indicators kind of telling us the story of where our streets have progressed over time since we've started throughout, looking at those various cycles 1 through 4. Ultimately, it looks as if in correlation to how our funding level is, it appears that we've kind of leveled out, as with our budgets has kind of leveled out a bit. Currently, our budget is at $3 million for the contracted maintenance work. So essentially, that's what we're looking at on this map in terms of some of the contracted maintenance projects that are planned for this year, as well as including the CIP projects on this map as an overall comprehensive look at the program. See, we could go through and take a look at the various locations, some of the main mill and overlay, curb and gutter type of locations I plan on working on. For example, would be Clinton Parkway from west of Castle to east of Wakarusa in that stretch. There's curb and gutter on the north side that westbound lanes that needs to be addressed, that's falling apart. But other than that, we plan on milling and overlaying that whole stretch, restriping. And I think that, well, in terms of facilities, that currently already has shared use paths in place. We got Peterson Road from North Iowa to Castle Drive, as well as a neighborhood north of Peterson on North Crest Line and Stowe Drive up in this area. That we plan on doing mill and overlay curb and gutter work as well. Be restriping Peterson Road, evaluating how we want to do that striping versus the center lane, center turn lane there. It has shared use path as well. Another main location we'll be looking at is for maintenance work is 15th Street east of Haskell out to the city limits there. We're going to do some concrete rehab on a concrete street that extends there past the park, and then mill and overlay east of there, reestablish mill and overlay, and then reestablish the pavement marking as well as the bike lanes that currently exist there. Neighborhood southwest of there, 15th and Haskell, we got several streets that I'm looking at microsurfacing, doing a surface seal on as a preservation technique. Some of the streets we had already patched this year, so we'll just be going in and surface sealing, but some of the others will be doing some patch as well that didn't get patched in 2017, I should say, and then performed here in 2018. We have several locations that are internal street maintenance is going to perform the overlays on, which is shown in the red/yellow dashed lines. One being like this, I think it's Anderson Acres area. And what we'll be doing is performing milling by contract, and then our internal street maintenance is going to be performing the overlay work. So trying to perform some more of that type of collaboration work to be more effective overall. I don't know if we have you have any specific discussion you want to talk about the CIP streets, Dave, or just kind of point them out, or?
Oh, well, on the street maintenance map, we also show some of our major CIP projects for next year, reconstruction type projects. So we'll be, as most are aware, reconstructing 19th Street between Iowa and Naismith. And that's the third phase of work there on 19th Street. We've redone the intersections at 19th and Naismith and 19th and Osdale, and so we'll be doing the pavement in between. That street's hasn't been in good shape, and it's been beat up from the truck traffic going on there with the Central District project, so it's been in the CIP for a long time, but it's on tap here for this summer to be reconstructed. Also, we have Castled on there from Bob Billings to 6th Street. We're wrapping up final utility relocations and easement acquisition for that project, and anticipate bidding that out here very shortly and starting that early next year.
How long are these projects?
The Castled project will be scheduled for the rest of 2018, throughout 2018, may go a little into 2019. The 19th Street project primarily will be in the summer of 2018. There may be some impacts into the fall, but we're maybe outside of the roadway, so we'll try to get traffic reestablished in between the school year. Other projects, Queens Road, that has been pushed into next year. We're on hold until the benefit district gets established, which will likely be early in next year by the City Commission, and then we'll proceed with final design plans and construction I would anticipate that starting at the earliest next summer and continuing on through the end of the year. And
Got the
Harvard
roundabout.
Wakarusa, that's going well. We're doing all the underground here with storm sewer here early this winter, and anticipate finishing that up by Christmas, then putting that on a winter hold or for a couple of months, and then reestablishing the work early in the spring. So we're going to plan on reopening all the lanes to traffic. We've been fortunate, we've had some pretty good weather to get a lot of work done, the underground work, and then go on a winter shutdown and then complete that in the spring.
Is that not on the map? Because
It's,
Which one?
still
it-
2017. Is that well,
It's-
You see a little red.
it's just
Yeah,
across.
it's not really,
I mean, it actually goes a little further south.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes a little further south, but
he's indicated it by basically a point at, at that intersection there in this
So
particular.
the road itself won't be changed, just that intersection?
we're reconstructing the street to the south to tie into the last project.
So that is what I'm asking about, that road work is not on the map? Is that?
Well, this dot, the way it's represented is not maybe completely clear that there is an extension of limits of where that project is going to, north and south, and even slightly east and west of there to.
I wonder if is it going all the way to Sixth Street, or is it?
Oh, no, the extent of,
Just
the project was
stepping
about
stones?
few hundred foot north.
Yeah, just
So-
a couple hundred feet, just to get the taper back into the 4-lane section,
So really, the roundabout is where it ends?
pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Predominantly, it was a roundabout project, and then we're continuing to match what we did north of Legends in between there, so that basically will be reflected all the way up to that, there's a church there, that intersection.
So a question on Peterson Road, you mentioned that it's, you're looking at striping evaluation there, 3-lane, potentially going to 2-lane with bike lanes. What are your factors, or when's that decision going to be made?
We're going to look at that here this spring. If we make a recommendation to change, that would come to the Transportation Commission. Right now, it's on our bikeway plan with a shared use path, and it has a shared use path on the north side of the street. But we have, we're doing this mill and overlay project, and we think it might be a good idea to look to see if we need to have a continuous center turn lane through there. There may be some areas where we need it, but maybe some that we don't, and we can evaluate if there's a potential to also include on-street bike facility on that segment.
There was something on 23rd Street you didn't comment on.
Oh, yeah. 23rd Street this is the project that we discussed last month about the center turn lane between Louisiana and Mass Street. With that, we are also going to mill and overlay 23rd Street from Louisiana over to Osdale. And so that project includes the mill and overlay. There's a water line replacement from Louisiana over to Leonard, and then that center turn lane project that we've talked about. So we're tying it all into one construction project, and anticipate that work to go on as early as next summer. And then,
In Parker, is that micro-surfacing? Is that?
yes, yeah.
Is that when they have their traffic calming stuff happen, is that part of that as well?
Well, what are we doing from 19th to 23rd on Barker?
It's where I think there's some traffic calming islands that exist currently there, on
Yeah.
that stretch, is that what they're, about where it'd be
Well,
surface sealing asphalt.
I think it's Leonard that actually got the speed
Leonard.
bumps on it.
Leonard was the one
Oh,
that
Lenard.
most recently got approved.
Well, in the past,
There was
we
stuff on south of 19th, and then
There
there
was
was
some,
stuff.
this last summer, we approved one from 15th to 19th for traffic calming in there, and then prior to this organization's existence, there was already one on the list from 19th to 23rd for traffic calming.
Hmm.
whether that's speed humps or whatever, but that was
Yeah.
on Lennar, not Clark.
Exactly.
I guess I'm just asking if all that factors into, like, what traffic calming gets done when and where.
Well, back in the past, when we didn't have traffic calming funds, we would look to do traffic calming with street projects. We're we're not planning to do that with street maintenance funds. Traffic calming, now that we have dedicated traffic calming funds and we have a prioritization list. So that's, with the street maintenance project, we're not planning to do that, to go through that process.
Is that a change, or is that just, like, I'm thinking like over at, is it Overland? Just on the side near where I live, on Trail, there was calming, but not street maintenance, but a street maintenance around there. Is it just different people doing the work that?
No, the trail road speed bumps were part of the traffic calming budget and not street maintenance, a street maintenance project.
Could you go over mill and overlay versus microsurfacing and the criteria, selection criteria, and how long it lasts?
And that,
Typically-
yeah, that'll depend on location, how old the
Yeah.
pavement, existing pavement is, that's where thing, and other environmental impacts, of course, and level of service, and the type of traffic you're getting on it will impact, there's multiple kinds of impacts, you know, in terms of how long your road could last, you know, especially with new overlay. The mill and overlay, that would be more of a minor to major rehab, depending on the extent of work, meaning we would, a typical mill and overlay would take off 2 inches of existing asphalt off a street and then reestablish that with a new asphalt surface overlay. Now, how that differs from the microsurfacing is that the microsurface is simply more of a surface seal. It's like more of a, I would say, I hate to compare it to, you know, coating of paint, but it's more of, it seals up and preserves that pavement that might be getting oxidized and starting to see some environmental, like dryness from the sun and moisture infiltration, and could seal it off and protect it, but it has some grit to it, some rock and cement, and so the emulsion material that are mixed to become a durable material sealant, essentially, that could last, you know, anywhere from 4 to 8 years, depending on the type of traffic impacts. It might even last longer in some cases. I mean, it'll start to ravel and lose material over time, in particular in stressed areas, or if there's poor drainage, you know, that sort of thing. But the mill and overlay could last, you know, 10 to 20 years. So it depends on how aggressive there need to actually be to that pavement to bring it up to a good condition that could be sustainable at that point. So,
Where's an example of microsurfacing?
We did 6th Street from
oh, that's a good one.
west city limits to like Folks Road a couple of years ago. That'd be an example of, you know, a higher volume street. That's not, that surface seal's not gonna last as long as some of these neighborhoods, I think it.
We did a double treatment layer on that on the arterial street, but that is held up really pretty well. And we even did it out on Clinton Parkway, west of Wakarusa, with the microsurfacing. That was a
Okay.
double treatment, and North Second, North Third, from north of the bridge, going to the city limits. We did microsurfacing as well there on the arterial. Generally speaking, you know, mill and overlay, once you're to a certain point beyond where you could just do the intermittent patching and say a surface seal, and that you really need to peel the surface off and kind of essentially start over with a new mat. you'll find yourself in that situation on a lot of arterials, just depending on the level of service and how hard that pavement has been treated over time, really, when it comes down to it. But we've seen application areas for the various preservation methods can be utilized in multiple different areas, and that's where we try to make those determinations on what's the best fit to take care of what we got. In crack sealing, I mean, that's another preservation method, and we do that internally through our internal crews. But that's kind of like the baseline, the beginning stages of street maintenance, aside from, before you get to having potholes that you need to end up
What are
fixing.
the
But
unit cost differences between mill and overlay and microsurfacing, roughly?
depending on, the actual just material cost for like a straight microsurfacing could be anywhere from $2.50 to $3 just for the surface treatment. But if you're doing patching prep work, then that could add several dollars per, let's say, square yard of coverage that you got on that street. So, and that could be an expensive type of patching. But I guess the consideration is like, how much street can we save and not disturb and just protect
And mill
and
and
keep in
overlay?
place? And mill and overlay could be anywhere from $10 to $16 a square yard or more, depending on if there's striping, reestablishment, that sort of thing. So,
Okay.
and then how much full depth patching beyond that you need to tack on with it. But just straight mill and overlay versus microsurface, it's quite a bit different, really.
Going back to the traffic calming, do we, I guess what I'm interested in understanding is, whenever we do this work, it kind of disrupts the neighborhood flow. And I'd be curious where traffic calming is also happening, and if there's a way to minimize that by doing it at the same time, that would make sense to me. I'd also imagine it might be more cost effective if you got people out there that would do the same, like work on that road, whether it's pavement, protection or putting in stuff. So maybe just help me understand that.
Well, the projects that we're looking at for next year, the highest ranked, aren't any of the roads that he's gonna be
Okay.
working on next year. So what we're looking at with the budget we have available in the top ranked projects, it does not get down to any of the streets that he's gonna be touching also, that Steve will be with this program. So I know Zach looked at it, they're further down on the list and
Okay.
weren't gonna be really the recommended priorities by the staff this year based on our current scoring criteria, so.
Are we gonna see that at some point?
Yeah, that, I'm working right now with neighborhoods
Okay.
to get the votes before we bring a list to you so that we know when we do get the list. And obviously, we're probably gonna bring a list that's a little short of what the budget is at first, and then we may do a secondary list a little bit later on once we get a feel for the cost in those. So you may see two separate groups next year, but I think the only one was Leonard that's being touched, and it's not
High enough.
probably in that grouping
Okay.
that would be any time next year, with the initial look I've done on it. Obviously, if neighborhoods don't get the votes and we start getting further down the list, things could change. But everyone I've contacted so far is interested still in pursuing it. And so I'm kind of working right now to get that list together so that you guys can see it probably February, March meeting, the recommended traffic calming list for next year. So.
All right. Any other discussion? Is there anyone in the public here today? Can't really. Okay, so I guess just your jacket, all right? Well, thank you for going over that with us. And this will go to the city commission,
December 19th,
okay,
so it'll be on the city manager's report.
okay.
So take a look at that if you would, yeah, as
Alright.
well.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
All right, do the sidewalk maintenance enforcement presentation.
right, so a month or two ago, I think you guys were copied in on a sidewalk complaint letter, and you asked about receiving an update on our procedures for enforcing sidewalk maintenance. So I'll go over that here briefly with you. Stop me anytime if you have any questions. We all know sidewalks in Lawrence aren't in the best of shape. There's some examples here of different types of issues that we have, whether it's vertical deflections or cross slope or cracked panels, brick sidewalks with gaps, depressions and water holes, etc. The city first did a sidewalk inventory back in 2006. We walked all of the sidewalks, and at that time rated them either good, fair, or poor. Good or critical, I guess. Also, good was the only condition that met the city code. But we created a map that showed that inventory, and I think at the time there was some discussion on how to approach sidewalk maintenance, and nothing ever transpired from that. In 2014, we did a second inventory of all the sidewalks to update the condition, walked all of the sidewalks in Lawrence using staff, and GPS located all of the areas that had deflections or ramps that needed to be upgraded. And we came up with some repair costs, and that was estimated at a little over $6.5 million for all of the defects, and $3.8 million for all of the ADA ramps. And this was again back in 2014, so some time has passed since then. So these are not up probably current numbers, but gives you a good understanding of the scope. This is a map that shows all of those points. So as you can see, those green dots, if I were to zoom in, are the all of the defects. So it's a citywide issue. Maintenance responsibilities by state statute. It's the adjacent property owner's responsibility to maintain sidewalks adjacent to their property. In our city code, we have some code requirements that define sidewalk hazards, some of the process on repairing or condemning sidewalks and providing notice that we follow, and I can kind of go into that here in a minute in the process. But those are the city code items. Maintenance responsibilities, not just the condition, but also snow and ice removal that many folks are aware of. So the city does take responsibility for sidewalks as well. Obviously, the sidewalks adjacent to city parks and city-owned property that are in the right-of-way are maintained by the city as a whole. Also, sidewalks that are shared use paths. For instance, shared use path like on Clinton Parkway or Castle, where you have 8 to 10 foot wide concrete path that's also used for pedestrian and bicycle transportation facilities. That those are maintained by the city. Parks and Rec does the maintenance of those, so they budget some concrete repair every year for repairing those sidewalks, and also do the snow plowing for the shared use paths. And also the city has maintained sidewalks adjacent to city infrastructure, such as curb inlets, manholes, et cetera, that are in the sidewalk. There's a picture of a curb inlet where the sidewalk has settled behind it. So we have made some upgrades to standards over the years to help alleviate these issues. Back in the past, storm inlets like this were set, and then the sidewalk was poured around it, and the contractor didn't get good compaction behind the storm inlet, so it settled and created that deflection. Now we tie in the sidewalk lid to the concrete sidewalk with rebar or tie bars to help prohibit that from happening in the future. So a little bit about the city process for when we receive complaints. It is a complaint-driven process, so we don't proactively go out and drive the city streets and mark sidewalks and send notices. We after receiving a complaint, we go out, do a site visit. We mark the areas that are not compliant. We provide written notification to the property owner. I believe it's 60 days that we give them, 30 days. And Steve's taking that on here this year. But so we provide that notice. If we get another complaint, we provide a second notice. We don't typically go through and send a second notice unless we get another complaint. So we have kept track of some that have been repaired to see if it got repaired. But if we don't get another complaint about it, if they fix it, great. If they don't, it stays in the same condition that it is.
Dave,
Yes.
when you issue the first complaint, do you let them know that you won't issue a second complaint unless they complain?
We don't put that in the letter.
You don't?
No.
Oh, it would need,
The
the neighborhood would need to know that, like whoever's reporting it would need to essentially keep following up.
Well, I understand, I just wonder how many people are gonna intuitively do that.
If we issue a second notice and they still do not make the repairs, we have the ability to issue a third notice, and with that third notice and final notice, we give them a date, and if they don't complete the sidewalk repairs by that date, the city has the ability by resolution to make the repairs and assess the costs onto that property owner. Since I've been here, we have not done that in any instance. We've gotten to sending the third notice out on a few, but we've never followed through with doing the repairs and making the assessments. So, but that is the process for sidewalk repair.
When the when you visit the site to assess the condition, would you mind explaining like how much of the area is reviewed? Is it both sides of a street, 1 block, 3 blocks?
Well, in the past, and this was something that our city surveyor did, Walt Ward. He did this he was here for a number of years and did this program. When we received a complaint, he would go out and review that block and mark up that block and send a letter to everyone within that block. So if it was an address mid-block and, someone, I think instinctively someone's walking at least that block on their route, and if they make a complaint, sometimes it's general, it's the house is in this block, sometimes it's specific, this house owner. But our process in the past was to go in and look at that block by block, and send a letter.
On both sides of the street, or just the side that was
Just the
reported?
side of the complaint. I've even had someone call and about a specific address, and we sent out the letters, and then they found out the neighbor got the letter, and they said, no, I just wanted that person to fix their sidewalk, and I asked why, and they're like, well, that's a landlord that owns that building or owns that sidewalk, and on our response is we don't differentiate who owns it, but that was the practice that we followed. So that's the way that we've approached it, and I'll show here a few of the numbers from the past on the repairs that were made. This is just an example of a complaint that we receive. We have a WUFU we call it WUFU, but it's an online reporting site for any number of issues with the city. So we get this, this is an example, and then we would pass that on to staff to go out and mark and send out a letter. This is an example of the letter. It references the city code and state statute on sidewalk repair. And obviously we include the address on there. Some of the history, and I apologize I haven't got the 2016 numbers up to date, but on some of the, going back about the last 10 years, and the number of complaints that we received per year, the letters sent to adjacent property owners. So again, if you had one complaint, you could end up sending 8 letters. The repair, those that made the repair, so you can see here in 14 and 15, it was approximately half of the folks made the repairs. Here some will end up sending us a second letter. The numbers here for 2017, I was talking with Steve earlier, some of these haven't gone through the full 30 days, I guess, for making the repairs, and I think some of them we need to update here, follow up by the end of the year. So it may end up being more than 23%, so that seems pretty low now, but a lot of them, I think we need to go back and double check on some of those. So it's likely going to be higher than that, but so it's been around 50%, which you know, it's good that those that get that we have at least half of the folks that try to make the repairs. Challenges, these things that we're all aware of and talked about over the years. Affordability is difficult if you're a low-income resident and you get this letter and it, you know, you're looking at a $1,000, $2,000 sidewalk repair bill. It's a big hit. So if you're trying to choose whether or not to buy groceries or prescriptions or other things that you need to fund, it's challenging. So that's always been an issue. The equality or equity aspect, and not everyone in Lawrence has a sidewalk. Of all 40,000 lots, approximately 40,000 lots in Lawrence, about 35% of the lots have an adjacent sidewalk. So, you know, the neighbor across the street is forced to maintain and own their sidewalk, but me on the other side of the street that doesn't have a sidewalk but uses that sidewalk is not responsible. So, and you know, there's that argument, which is a challenge. And then obviously nature is a challenge. Over time, these sidewalks, some of them in Lawrence, brick sidewalks especially, they're over 100 years old. You got tree roots, driveways, soil aspects that cause some of these deflections. So a lot of it is neglect over decades of time on some of these sidewalks, and the repair costs will continue to mount until there's a way to proactively approach the problem.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard that data that you just stated. I don't think I've heard that before. 35% of all the lots have sidewalks. So 65% of lots in our community don't have adjacent sidewalks. Did I hear it correctly?
Correct. Yeah. I had a table and I printed it out here before this meeting, and I can share that with you. During the Bike Ped Task Force, I don't know if we presented it at a meeting, but through some correspondence on some of the different ideas that we talked about, I found where we went back and created a table. So obviously it's been a couple of years, it may have changed a little, but roughly speaking, those were the numbers.
That seems really significant. I mean, basically 2/3 of our lots, this isn't their problem. And we talk about, you know, how does it, whether it's regarded as a public, you know, part of our public infrastructure maintained with public dollars versus private dollars. It feels like 2/3 of people are not gonna, essentially not having to pay for this, which seems significant, I think.
Yeah. And if you go back, I'll just reference this map because I have it here, but back, when the old town site was built, we built sidewalks on both sides of the street. And over time, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, sidewalk didn't get built on either side of the street. So you got neighborhoods in central Lawrence that don't have sidewalk on either side. And then 80s, 90s, sidewalks got started putting back on one side of the street. So you get further west, you see it on one side but not the other. And now, as of 2006, I believe, the Land Development Code requires both sides of the street. So when you see new streets, they're on both sides. So again, it's over time, the practice of constructing streets and sidewalks has changed. And so, primarily in the low to moderate income areas where you have a lot of issues and you have sidewalks on both sides of the street. So that's another challenge with the issue. But just a couple of notes on our standards. The city standards is 4-inch thick concrete. Our residential sidewalks are 5 foot wide. Residentials and collector streets, we do 6 foot wide sidewalks on our arterial streets. Brick sidewalks are a challenge. We give the property owner the ability to go back and replace brick sidewalks with concrete. If it's in a historic district, we try to check with our historic resources administrator to see if there's any concerns on that. But generally speaking, the property owners had the ability to go back and use concrete. Obviously, concrete's easier to maintain in the long term, but I think we all understand that brick sidewalks have some historical significance and appeal to them as well. So that's just another a challenge with sidewalks is the bricks. We do, the city does have a small stockpile of sidewalk bricks that we can make available to residents that are making small repair areas. We don't have enough to do whole lots at a time, but we do have various bricks, and not every brick is similar, so there's different stamps or different patterns on bricks, and we have a few at our street maintenance yard that we can provide residents that want to match in some brick. Roughly speaking, replacement cost of 5 foot wide sidewalk at $6 a foot. For a 50-foot lot, about $1,500. The average 70 to 75 foot lot, you're around $2,250. For a 100-foot lot, $3,000. And again, if we're looking at making sidewalk repairs and you're doing it lot by lot, the costs are more significant because you have a contractor going to each different location and mobilizing, and so the economies of doing larger stretches could help reduce the cost. But for averages, that's the number that we've used. Just a brief history on some of the work the task force did with sidewalk maintenance. This was an issue that was looked at with that task force amongst all of the other issues. They realized that this current policy isn't working, and there's no plan to fix sidewalks in the community. We did look at a couple of different revenue generating practices. The utility fee, that would be similar to, you have a stormwater utility fee if you're a property owner in Lawrence. That's not allowed by Kansas statute if you don't have the benefit of that facility. So we're not able to issue every lot in Lawrence a utility fee because not everyone has a sidewalk. So that, from our legal interpretation, that has not been allowed by Kansas statutes. Other ways to pay for sidewalk maintenance, benefit districts. That's where you take a geographic area and make the repairs, and then it's an assessment mechanism where it's assessed on the property owners over time. There's challenges with that too, with low-income residents. Other ways to pay for sidewalk maintenance, property tax increase is always an option. It's burdensome, obviously, on those owners that that pay property taxes. And, there's been discussion about having a cost-sharing plan where maybe the city pays for a portion and the homeowner pays for a portion if they are on a fixed income or low to moderate income. So some of those were discussed. There wasn't a preferred recommendation from the task force on the funding, but it was for the city to establish a program in 2017 with the goal of bringing all sidewalk and ramps up to code by 2030. So in October 2016, City Commission directed staff to develop a program that was based off that task force recommendation. In March of this year, we presented a repair program that is similar to the existing policy and city code that requires property owners to maintain sidewalk adjacent to their property. When we presented that, we looked at breaking the city up into eighths. With this initial proposal, we looked at the northwest part of the city, went out and marked the locations that didn't, again, walked that area and marked the locations that didn't meet code. And I believe the estimated cost was around $250,000 for that segment. Obviously, that area of town is not as in bad of condition with sidewalks as other areas of town because it's relatively new, but staff thought that would be a good place to start to see if this program would work and how the process would shake out. With that proposal back in March, we also in that policy included a couple of funding ideas that there would be a cost sharing and financial assistance program that homeowners could apply for. So if you met the low income threshold, I believe by HUD, if you qualified, that the city would set aside some funds to assist those that met that requirement. And also I think we had cost sharing ideas for those that had sidewalks on multiple sides of the lot. So if you had if you had a sidewalk on two sides of your lot, the city would pay for half of your sidewalk. And the City Commission, we discussed that, and they ultimately ended up deferring that policy. And that is the state of sidewalk maintenance. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks for that presentation.
I have a technical question about brick sidewalks. The historical brick sidewalks in Lawrence, were they just laid in a sand bed? Do we know, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, it's all over the place. There's a lot that, if they were laid in sand, the sand has washed away over time. So we've taken some of these brick sidewalks up, they're just in dirt.
Well, my follow-up
Right.
to that is it less expensive to reuse the brick? I know it's labor intensive to take them up, store them, put a nice subsurface in, put them back in.
I think that's actually what a lot of folks
Are
down in
doing.
East Lawrence, they've had a few kind of repair projects, and it's just people pitching in
Yeah.
and taking all the bricks off,
Mhm.
putting down some sand and starting it over.
You don't have any cost for doing that, I mean,
Oh,
Contractor
we
cost.
do. I don't have it with me. It's at least 50% more. It's probably
50% more
probably
than
in
a
that
new?
range, yeah.
you're kidding.
It's just a lot of labor.
Okay.
And yeah, the sand's more used to get everything, to get it level more than compacted. I mean, it's always important to have the subgrade of the sidewalk bed, I guess, compacted, because that's
Mhm.
what causes the heaves. Yeah, it's not cheap. You know, the projects that we've done where we've tied in brick streets to brick sidewalks or done some work, we've just used existing old bricks, so we've taken them up and basically just relayed the existing bricks down if they were in good enough condition.
Right,
Sometimes you can just flip them over.
right,
There's a good side to them, but
right. seems to me when I walk on a brick sidewalk and it's moist, they can be pretty slick.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be real slick.
Mhm.
And I'd rather look at a brick sidewalk than a
Than walk
concrete
on it.
sidewalk. But I'm not sure I'd rather walk on one, unfortunately. But you could probably get brick that's more textured, that has a better, you know, service on it.
Well, I think this issue is the most, baffling issue that the pedestrian bike issues task force dealt with, which is kind of why at the end of the day, when the report needed to be published, essentially it was kicked back to staff to say, develop something by the end of 2017. So here we are. End of 2017, staff put together a proposal and the city commission considered it, but ultimately deferred, which I think, now that we're here, feels like it's a responsibility we have to provide them some advice on what to do. So I'm kind of curious if you guys, where you're at with this issue, how high of a priority you think it is, and what your energy is to taking it on. I don't see any energy at all. So there's a memo that I asked the Public Health Law Center to do some research on this, and I shared that maybe a couple months ago. They identified 2 communities, Englewood, Colorado, and Edina, Minnesota, as having what they thought were legally viable options for Kansas. The Englewood, Colorado example was essentially an insurance utility for people that had responsibility for concrete. So that 35% of the lots would be put into that utility. They would be charged, and when there's a repair need, then they would be able to rely on the utility to fund the repair. So the people that don't have sidewalks don't pay for any of that. It really just is a way to finance the. No, it's kind of interesting. It's a opt-out utility, so they have over 90% participation. So some people have opted out. I imagine if people think they can do the repairs, at a decent cost, then they don't see the need to.
How much is it run?
It's not very much, and I'm not sure what the annual revenue that it generates is. The city itself actually participates in the utilities, so that's how they finance their own maintenance. It's a smaller community as well. And then the other one in Edina, I don't think I fully understand it, but it seems as if they've established a utility that serves the entire community. And in that case, I believe everyone is paying into that utility to be able to benefit from the utility's service, which is pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. So they call it a pedestrian and bicycle safety fund or something to that effect. And that one, distributes, I believe, if I understand it correctly, it distributes the cost of that transportation utility, if you will, onto everyone. I don't know how they do that proportionally or exactly how that's done, but Mission, Kansas tried to do something like that, and they were challenged, and ultimately the Supreme Court declared that that approach was not constitutional, that in fact what they were doing was actually a tax, not a fee, not a utility. So that decision was just handed out earlier this year. So that's where I asked the Public Health Law Center to study that and help us consider how else we could do it to be compliant with state law. My sense is this is not going to be resolved unless there's a way to pay for it. And that's the big challenge, is there a way to publicly finance maintenance of sidewalks? And is there political will to establish that new revenue stream? Because it would, be paid for by the public, not just the 35% of those that get complaints filed, multiple times, so.
I've noticed in our neighborhood south of campus, just like in the last year, I see more people walking in the streets. And I'm like, well, it's a local neighborhood street. There's a lot of traffic during the week just because a lot of people park there, but and the sidewalks in our neighborhood aren't that bad. But obviously, people are more comfortable walking on that surface and dealing with traffic than being on sidewalks that are kind of inconsistent but not in terrible shape. So that's not solving the problem, that's an observation.
One question is on staff's current proposal. How much would a property owner be expected to pay? Would this be like, it's on the bill, it's a one-time bill, boom? Or would it be financed over like 5 years?
Well, the program that we presented had an option to use a city contractor bid number. So we would bid out an estimated amount of square foot of repairs and get a unit cost from a contractor. The property owner would have had the option to find their own contractor or use the city-owned contractor, and they would work directly with the contractor, so it wouldn't be through the city.
Okay.
It'd be the private owner would work with that contractor, and the contractor would bill the private owner,
Right.
and the city would after 30 days go back and see if the repairs are made, and then
Okay.
follow up. So that was the way that it was presented.
So it would be cheaper for the homeowner, but you'd get a good unit cost, but still be a big hit.
Correct, yeah. And that was the idea we presented, and we put it out for bid, and even the contractors that, for this program that looked at the way we were presenting it had some concerns. I think we only had one bid, and it was $7 or $8 a square foot or something. It was higher than our original projection, and there was a lot of questions about, I think a lot of it's just, is all of that, I mean, it's billing every property owner and all of that other work, other than just the concrete repair. So there's some other costs in there, other than just the concrete.
Was there consideration to kind of make you where you're basically moving risk from the contractor to you, and then the city collects from the homeowner?
I think that was something that was discussed too. Another issue is the legal responsibility of the sidewalk. So if we're doing that and we're taking over, there's some legal aspects of that too that were discussed. But that's where we landed with it.
Yeah, it was a good discussion. I mean, if you're interested in watching that video, it's out there. So, Commissioner Herbert apparently called a lot of different contractors to ask them why they didn't bid on it. And I can't say for sure, but it sounded like one of the concerns was just trying to deal with a lot of property owners, just a lot of, when I think about, in my own, in my home, I have a fence that needs repaired, and, I've reached out to 3 or 4 fence contractors, and I still haven't decided what to do. So, I just think, wow, if I had a sidewalk to take care of and this happened, how long would it be before I get around to getting it fixed? The simplest would be just to let the city, let the time expire, the city comes in there and does it, and then I write a check to the city and pay for it. But that wasn't how it was kind of presented. It wasn't a city does it first proposal. I mean, it's really frustrating as property owner to have to figure out how to get the best deal and how to get, high enough quality. So it's like you ask for your friends and neighbors, for advice on that. I mean, you know how it is if you're a property owner. So there is a simplicity to just saying the city takes care of this, and even if it does mean we get the bill, and maybe there's a way to finance that over 5 years or a year.
Big spot, a big hurdle, somebody getting a bill for $1,500 all at once.
And then in my neighborhood, my sidewalk goes right up to the street, and the street has big potholes by the curb, and so I'm thinking, do I wanna wait until they fix that? Where I don't know how those two jobs would, if I fix the sidewalk, is that gonna get torn up when they come and do the street, when it's scheduled?
Oh, so maybe you're thinking they'll get a free sidewalk? Is that?
No, I just don't wanna do it and then have to do it over again,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
Just question, like you said, homeowner, like I have a bunch of questions and I don't even know who to ask,
Mhm.
where to start. So far, my sidewalk is kind of okay.
Well, Charlie, my 2 cents would be if this is something that we own, so to speak, as far as this group goes, that's a big deal. And that's, would you guys concur that that's where this is? It's in this group's hands at this moment?
No, I mean, it went to the city commission. I think they have the ability to refer it back to this commission to review
And they
particular
haven't
changes.
done
They haven't done it. In my
Yeah, at that
opinion, it
point,
would be a
we-
good,
Had we even met yet?
it would be
Or
a good
Maybe we
topic
had one meeting.
to ask them if we're able to get them to our January study session, all-day study session
Yeah.
retreat, to see if this is a priority they want this group to work at, or if at the end of the day, I think it's a funding decision. This group can make a recommendation on that.
Yeah.
But we went through a lot of discussion with the Bike Ped Task Force on funding and never settled on a final, something that worked for everyone, but I don't know if that's ever gonna happen.
I think it is a funding decision, but it also is a decision like, do we want to shift how this is taken care of? And so, it may not be that there's agreement on that it should be paid for through some public financing, and maybe.
Are there any Kansas communities where the city pays for it? Or is it not?
Yeah, there are some examples of the cost-sharing approach that the city proposed, and Lenexa has been doing sidewalk maintenance, so it's not unheard of. They pay for that, I believe, through their general revenue, so it's not their general fund. So what would be different is establishing a new revenue. Even Topeka might make decisions about whether that's, even if we find a legal way to do that, it's uncertain if that could lead to preemption, by the state if they think that's not appropriate. So I think there's a lot of, like, which way do we go? Or is it, if the commission wants our help, I think that's a really good question to ask them at the retreat. Is this something you're looking for help on? Because they didn't refer it to us. They kind of heard it directly from staff and then just kind of deferred indefinitely. So it's just on hold. And I guess in my mind, as a member of that task force, it feels like that recommendation is, there was appropriate effort by the city staff to respond to that recommendation, and they did, and so it's kind of stuck. So I feel some ownership still over trying to resolve it. But it would be helpful to know, like, is that just me, or did you guys feel up to taking it on? If the city commission, if they knew that we were interested in doing this, I think that might help them. If we're not interested in doing it, they, I guess, to me, it's a question also of ourselves. Is that something we'd want to take on?
Well, I'll try to answer that partially anyway. I know the group that's looking at complete streets is meeting like every 2 weeks. And it's slow. I mean, you know, to get an issue that's that kind of broad and important, like this one would be, you know, I know I'm sitting here being quiet like I've got my hands full now, you know. And if you're looking around the table, you're not getting a whole lot of people saying, yeah, I have the time, commitment, interest. Maybe some people are thinking about it, but nobody's just jumping up and down saying, yeah, I'm ready to go. And I think that's something we should talk about at the retreat. You know, what are the expectations that we have for people that sit at this table in terms of time, interest, all those things. And I think it'd be good to know more about that. I kind of know where I am and what my limits are, but, you know, the question you're asking, I think a lot of people would be saying, well, I'm not sure. You know, I care about things like that, but is that, you know,
Right.
is that, you know,
No, that's exactly what I'm asking.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it takes time on everyone's part, you know, to do it. And on the task force, we had a lot of meetings and had a lot of discussion about the question around, if you did have funding, what would you prioritize? And, you know, those were meetings on top of the task force meetings, you know, meetings on weekends, and it takes time. And I think, you know, this would be probably some research, trying to figure out more about, and if Adina and Englewood are both viable options, learning more about exactly how that works. Does it generate the revenue that'd be sufficient for a community our size and the infrastructure needs we have, or so I think you know, it's personally for me, it's important enough. I think I'd be willing to commit more time to that issue. I don't want to be the only one that does it, so I think it'd be important to see that there's, you know, maybe 2 others on the commission that think that's the project they can spend time on.
We also gotta keep in mind, we had a big discussion about traffic calming, and that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
And if that's something we're taking on next year, and complete streets, how much?
I mean, then we're done. So we got 9 of us.
So
so,
that's kind of,
you know,
I just wanna throw that out, that I.
If you think 3 on each, if there's a committee, if you will, call it that, you know.
Yeah, and if you expect staff to be involved in each of those, along with doing all the other things, that becomes really taxing too for us, because, you know, like I think with the goals that I have next year set, that it's tough to start adding to that, and I don't know if it's a better approach to tackle 1 or 2 things at a time, versus let's try to tackle 4 and do it slower. But I think January might be a good time to talk through that with the group.
Have you sent that appointment out?
No, because we're meeting next week, the 3 that volunteered for,
Yeah.
to kind of help
We did-
form what that
the-
is. We did say it's gonna be the 26th, but we
yeah.
don't know the hours or schedule, even a basic schedule yet. We're meeting next Thursday.
I
And
just
I was
kind
planning
of,
on sending out the agenda, kind of a
Yeah.
basic hours and schedule after that.
I've penciled in just the whole day.
Yeah.
The planning commission, I think they went from, was it 8 to 4? 8:30 to 4?
Yeah, it's virtually gonna be all day. I was just kind of holding on
Mm-hmm.
until we knew who all we wanted there
Mm-hmm.
and what hours. When we kind of set that up next week, I'll go ahead and send out the appointments.
I do think this is an important thing for us to address. I'm trying to remember, I mean, I think maybe that was something we thought about while still doing the task force, is that the Transportation Commission might be able to look more into some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was the hope that if we couldn't get it done, we would kick it over to, you know,
Yes.
this group to
Yes.
finish. And, you know, a few of us were part of that, so,
Mhm.
but I know we're a different group, so it's,
So do you
my,
think-
my thought is, if we don't take any role in it, we're just gonna basically be passive, and it's gonna still be advanced by this community that has been working on this for over a decade. So it seems to just be appropriate to rise up to the to the occasion. I mean, in 2006, the first sidewalk inventory was done, and as you mentioned, Dave, it was, it kind of didn't actually result in any significant change. So, and there are archival documents you can look at around an attempt to address the issue then. So here we are, fast forward, a decade. So it just feels like someone needs to really try to own this and put together another proposal that the commission can consider.
I think that's really what is needed, is someone to go after it. I think that it's basically whether it's something you can do by Kansas state law is the hang up, right? Because you could get so far into the process that you determine, or it's determined that you can't, and I think that's been the hang up.
Seems
the most part.
The law makes it either or. Seems like property owner has to do it, or the city has to do it. There's no good. That doesn't seem to allow for a nice compromise like a utility or even an opt-in utility.
Well, it might be useful to kind of develop a couple scenarios, like going back to the staff proposal, thinking about ways of making that, adjusting it to make it maybe more palatable. And then another option would be attempting a new revenue stream that might, be more of a game changer. Or get some better direction from the commission. If they want us to have a role in this, then ask them if they want to see kind of both options fleshed out, or if they'd like us just to focus on one. That might be useful. But I think we kind of owe it to the folks that have tried and failed to do something. So. Any last thoughts? Your very last official business? Any words of wisdom? We can recruit you to a subcommittee. All right. Yeah. You have something else to?
Just real quick.
What's that? Okay, go ahead. I think we're done on this one.
Just kind of briefly wanted to show you guys, obviously, you guys have seen the email I've sent out asking everybody best times next year for study session. I don't know we're going to find a time that works. I mean, we're going to try to find the time that works best for most people. Obviously, sometimes somebody says, I absolutely can't do afternoons, and other people say, I can only do afternoons. So we're going to have to find that balance and try to find a time that works for most people. And I don't know what that's going to be yet. I'm still waiting on a couple responses. So if you have not responded, please do so I can take a look at what our options are. We also have the constraint of the availability of this room. So it's kind of tough. But so therefore, I don't really know yet what we're going to do as far as, so I have TBD, but this is kind of just a newer format I came up with. Zoomed in really far there. Where the top part addresses more of the regular meeting items. We've discussed we're not going to have a January meeting. Kind of the future items here that have been shown previously, and as agendas come out, those will obviously fall off of that and go on to agendas. And then down here would be more the study session schedule. As we move items from this proposed list up, they'll start filling in. And I think that some of that's going to be shaped in January when we meet and we can talk about what real priorities do we have, what do we want to work on in these study sessions. If you guys have some ideas of items that you for sure want to look at next year, there was already obviously some in here, kind of been already on there. Some of these I believe we're going to tackle at the January retreat. But if you guys have some other ideas of things, we can add it to this list and start plugging it into months. But I really look at January's retreat kind of shaping where we go with these next year. So any comments on this kind of new format or any additional items you'd like me to add at this point?
Again, I'm not on this committee next year, but one of the things I guess that came to mind is, you know, back Traffic Safety Commission 5-6 years ago, we had a request for cell phone ban, hands-free use.
Yeah, that's.
And I think that is that on there?
Yeah, right here.
Perfect.
We
Okay.
actually met, just so you guys are aware, we have a multimodal staff team that meets every other week. And we just were able to get someone from the police department assigned. He came yesterday to the meeting and we talked with him, Captain Heffley. And he's gonna be involved with the staff team going forward. That's something I've asked him to help me on because staff has tried to get the information from our CPD and hasn't had a lot of success. So I think maybe if we can, within the law enforcement community, kind of work that angle, maybe we'll get a little more. And also, if we're gonna propose anything, we need to have buy-in from the police department. We need to have their input. So now that we have really that person kind of assigned as our liaison, that'll be something we'll start looking at and bring them back at some point here next year. And just kind of need to get some data and how are they doing it in Manhattan and stuff like that before we can really look at is it feasible here. So that is one thing on there now.
I would add one other thing as my parting shot from leaving this because I've been doing it for like 7 years. And back in the traffic safety, we talked about it, but I believe there's kind of a hole in the city's, it's called traffic code, and it's the traffic circles. It's kind of a free-for-all what you can do at them, and there's not really an assigning of right-of-way, but we're using them to control, I'm going to use the term, traffic control devices. And you pull up to one and you don't know if you have the right-of-way, or some people are treating it like a roundabout. I keep in my glove compartment because I've been pulled over by Lawrence police officers, highway patrol, because I turned left in front of them, which is legal, and they just don't know the rules. And I think that's across the city. But as a concerned person that I see this and I see it happening, and there's kind of this hole in the traffic code for these traffic circles.
Well, we actually had that question from a citizen a month or two ago. They got pulled over for making a left, and we went back and found that Lawrence established an ordinance that it's legal to do that if you have the right of way. And I forwarded that to the police department, asked them to spread the word, because I think some of it, they just didn't know that, so.
But, I mean,
But
I've had
you're-
people like coming at me, like just turn, like go around it. Like I would think it's right away, just like you pull up to a normal intersection, but the traffic code doesn't cover that, in my opinion, at all. I've looked at it.
I think it's also just difficult for people to know what is a traffic circle versus a roundabout.
Exactly.
I can add to that, I think. Are you done, Chris?
I'm just putting that as
Okay.
something I don't see here and it's been discussed before, and I think it's dangerous myself. I mean, I just go there and if somebody's coming at me or coming from a different direction, I'll stop 25 feet in front of it because I have no idea what they're gonna do.
Well, if you look at like Overland Parks, I just know because we're looking right now at expanding our details and specifications, signage, striping, traffic, all kinds of stuff. They actually, their traffic circles, they actually stripe them like a roundabout. So there isn't a center median, but they stripe it there.
Like,
So that it would basically force it into a roundabout type situation.
like
So-
when I pull up to it, I don't know if this person thinks this is a roundabout or a standard intersection. So I don't know what they're gonna do.
And I always treat them like a roundabout, so.
Yeah,
But
so do I.
I don't think they're
Except in your
roundabouts.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, really, that's where, when those old, whatever they were, temporary
That's a good
circles,
name
I mean, it seemed weird to go around them.
for 'em. Well, let me add.
So I'm just saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, it might be a good topic.
I'm not gonna go any further. I could talk here, for a long time about traffic calming. But we did a couple of things last year, and as far as things that we could do during a study session, I think field trips would be good to look at. I meant to compliment Steve at the end of his presentation, but I think Charlie and I, maybe
Hey,
Dave.
Chris?
Did a field trip with Steve, and we went around town for a couple hours, and he pointed out, the various pavement conditions, and examples everywhere of things that needed it or things that were gonna need it, and how he looked at the PCI and all that stuff. We came back here and looked at the manual that, if I recall, you actually wrote most of that, you know? And my point is, that is huge for me to have done that, and gives me a more of a base to evaluate some of these things. Like, when he gets up and he talks about the index, I believe him, you know? I don't, just based on those 2 hours, I have a lot of confidence in what he brings to the table. The other thing that I think Charlie and I did, we went on a ride with Bob Nugent on the transit system for a couple hours. And that just was a big deal. And I think it would be kind of fun to get out of here. And I don't know how you deal with the, you know, the open meeting part of that, but think of some things that, like roundabouts and traffic calming and stop signs and, you know, kind of the things that we're going to be looking at, and go show, you know, let's go out and look at it. And have you guys explain some of these things in a little more detail. And
We do have a bike ride on here as a potential.
yeah, well, that would be,
We did
things
one.
like that.
We did, our staff team did one recently, and we had Parks and Rec, he led it, and kind of took us on, here's what a show looks like, this is what it's like to ride on a street
Sure.
with one, or a bike lane, or,
Sure.
that was good, but I would think, do we say below the number?
No, we can, the group can get together outside of this room for those type of events. It just needs to be published, the location and the time.
Okay.
So if there's a quorum, if there's more than, it'd be 5 next year that
Sure.
meet. So yeah, that's absolutely a possibility. Good
Well,
idea.
I would suggest doing stuff like that, you know, for some of these sessions, you know,
Good idea.
it might even be more valuable in many ways.
Okay, that's good. So yeah, as you, I mean, think about it between now and January. We can have more of these discussions about what type of things we want to tackle next year. I think at that meeting, the group that was kind of volunteered to help set that agenda for that all-day retreat, like I said, we're meeting next week, so I think there should be a meeting invite coming out after that that sets kind of the hours and the basic schedule and who we're asking to be involved outside of this group, so I think we're gonna meet until that time. But please get back to me on the schedule for the study session.
I think we're done. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your service. All your years of.